Hello Lorcana YouTube community. It breaks my heart to be making this video today because I am reacting and giving my thoughts to the new news of the first ever banned cards in Disney Lorcana, and unfortunately they banned two very important cards that belong in the Sapphire and Steel decks, at least the decks that I use, whether it be New World, No New World, or even just different types of new archetypes that I've been leaning towards to. Honestly, Hiram is such a key card when it comes to the draw engine overall, how the deck works. Yes, I do agree with this ban. I think Hiram is too strong for the type of card that it is. It's a 4 cost inkable, has 6 willpower, so you usually need 2 bodies to trade in with Hiram. I do understand that it's good that it got hit because in Ruby Sapphire it was just too strong to deal with. They were able to draw cards and then just have a bunch of removal in their hand. And honestly, for me personally, I think it was okay to hit Hiram because we still had good cards like Bell, the new Bell from set 7, the legendary Scrooge, legendary Tamatoa, but they also banned Fortisphere. Now, why is this Fortisphere ban more damaging than Hiram? Well, because again, like I said, we still had those other 3 cards, Bell, Scrooge, and Tamatoa, to use in Sapphire Steel. But now that they hit Fortisphere, honestly, what draw power is Sapphire and Steel left with other than Whole New World? Yeah, Whole New World, it was the original way that we used to draw cards, but it was always paired with Hiram. The thing with Whole New World now is just that the meta is going to be so fast, like with no longer Ruby Sapphire having that draw engine with Hiram, and you slow down the Sapphire and Steel decks, you're gonna have Amber Steel, Green Steel, Amethyst Emerald, Steel Amethyst, all these fast aggro decks that can combat the meta. And without having Fortisphere and Hiram, the Sapphire and Steel decks are forced to play other cards that aren't that good. And honestly, it doesn't really make sense. And again, I agree with the Hiram hit, but the fact that they hit Fortisphere as well, what draw power again is left with Sapphire and Steel? You have decks like anything Amethyst, they play the Merlin Rabbit, they play Genie, they have friends on the other side. If you're playing Amber Steel, you have access to Rapunzel, Ariel, Whole New World, and then with Emerald Steel, you have the Diablo, which is such a strong card, and the Prince John combination. You have all these different decks that have these very good draw engines, and they're not just draw engines, they're like really good threats to have on the board. And now what is Sapphire and Steel left with? Whole New World is just too slow right now in the testing that I've had these past couple days, just because of again how fast the meta can be. And then Sapphire Steel was always an anti-meta deck, so we were always running these anti-meta tools. And now that the meta has shifted to where these decks that were on a limit because of Hiram, now that Hiram's not here anymore, these decks have no threshold and honestly are just gonna go pretty crazy. And I think the meta that we're headed into right now is the same meta, just you have a different broken card at the top, I guess. Now you're gonna have Diablo decks everywhere in combination with Prince John. You're gonna have a lot of Amber Steel, pretty much like just Steel in general, just because again how Sapphire lost Hiram, and that draw power is really good because now the deck's gonna be a little bit more slower and a little bit more inconsistent. So far in my testing with Whole New World and playing 5 drop characters like Cogsworth, Sad Beast, Tinkerbell, and these old cards, you kind of give up that explosion that you had late game because they hit Fortisphere. Yes, you could still play item decks that have like other cards like Last Cannon and other like Maurice's Workshop and different types of items, but honestly, just having Popsicle as your 1 drop and then forcing to have to play these other bad 1 drops to play Bill and then play Scrooge and then play Tamatoa. Honestly, the item package kind of feels a little bit more lackluster. Now, it has just been a couple days, and obviously, I still need to test more. And don't get me wrong, Whole New World, not even just Whole New Worlding, but being able to contest the board with always being able to ramp on turn 2 and then going into Grandma Tala or Scrooge, followed up by a Cogsworth and a Tinkerbell, is very strong right now in the current Steel meta that we're in, just because of how you can contest the board. And once you get Cogsworth on the board, honestly, your other characters can start questing pretty freely. Um, I, I do think that Sapphire Steel just got knocked down a tier. Maybe I'm speaking too soon, but I still think the deck is viable. But if there was a big competition tomorrow, like a DLC, or even Worlds, I'd be leaning towards a deck that's non-Sapphire and something that's a little bit more aggro and that just has a very strong drop package on its own. I do think though that this is one step going forward that's kind of good for Ravensburger to address as far as balancing the meta. I do want to talk about these two cards because I mentioned it earlier, which is going to be Diablo and Prince John. Now, I'm not complaining that Hiram got hit. Again, I understand it. I do complain that Fortisphere got hit because you're really making Sapphire, at least the decks that I was using outside of Ruby Sapphire, way more weaker than they were now. But I mean, if you would have just hit cards like Diablo and Prince John as well, and honestly, they could have even hit Daisy because Daisy is a very strong card in Amber decks just because of how strong the 4 willpower is. I mean, any of these cards that they could have hit, and honestly, I would have been okay with it. But these cards just make the game so unfun. And if they were going for that approach, right, of balancing the meta, making it healthier, why didn't they hit all these other cards like Prince John, pairing that with Diablo? Prince John has Ward, and since that Emerald Steel deck's already a discard deck, the fact that you really can't interact with Prince John, sure, you could use a card like Grab Your Swords in Sapphire Steel, but then, any Steel deck is playing Pete. Emerald Steel is playing the 2-drop Ursula that can discard a card from your hand. That's a song, or that's a song, right? So anything that you have to answer Diablo or Prince John, honestly, they just get sniped by Ursula. And even again with a card like Daisy, your opponent can play Pete. So now you're playing the Sapphire and Steel deck that's a little bit more predictable as far as what lines of plays that you can do to counter these other decks. I really do think though that these should have hit at least Diablo or Prince John. I can understand Daisy might be a little bit too much, but I think honestly this combo package is just so insane. It's more broken than Hiram and Fortisphere. At least I think so. Again, we do have a lot of answers to these cards, quote unquote, but the decks that run these cards already have really good answers to that. And then their decks are just good, right? Like they don't have to play bad cards to counter good cards, like Sapphire and Steel. Like why are we forced to play Fire the Cannons, Grab Your Swords, play all these cards that just don't really flow with the deck well because it was always an anti meta deck, and the anti meta deck now lost its draw power. So now I feel like all these other decks are gonna have no limit and really gonna like just be crazy. Again, I could be wrong. This is just the first couple days in the meta. I've already been doing some online testing, and so far that's what I've seen. Sapphire and Steel is still in okay spot, especially if it's just going to be pure steel. You could just always tech for it. I do think though that the draw power is very, very lacking, and I'm trying to find a good way to not just have to rely on Whole New World, but also have very good late game cards. Because you need to be able to play high density lore threats after you Whole New World, and right now trying to fit all of that plus trying to counter cards like Diablo, Prince John, Daisy, it's really making the deck try not to be too inconsistent. But I mean, it is what it is. The community wanted these cards hit, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, that's my initial thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down below, what you guys thought of my reaction. This ban list is crazy. I really can't wait to make new Sapphire and Steel content showing how the deck's going to change post Hiram. If you guys haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please go ahead and hit that sub button. Helps the channel grow, and it means a lot.